Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolutely wild journey of a low-budget 1999 teen comedy that completely defied the odds. We are going to look at exactly how a script that honestly nobody wanted turned into a historic pop culture phenomenon, one whose impact is still being felt today, decades later. If you want to understand how Hollywood franchises are built, how they're milked for all they're worth, and how they're occasionally resurrected, well, this is the perfect case study. Okay, let's dive into this, because this hilariously self-deprecating quote is the actual literal original working title of the movie. Screenwriter Adam Hers penned a script so raw, so honest, and incredibly raunchy based on his own high school days in East Great Falls, Michigan. Studios were absolutely terrified of it. Yet, the voice was just so authentic that it somehow sparked an intense bidding war. So that brings us to a massive mystery. How in the world did this highly explicit underdog script, written by a total unknown, eventually build an international billion-dollar empire? To figure that out, we really have to start at the very beginning. Section 1, the $11 million gamble. When Universal Pictures finally won the rights, they were hoping for a modern-day Porky's, but they were playing it incredibly safe. They gave the directors a tiny, restrictive budget of just $11 million, which meant they had to scour Los Angeles for fearless, unknown actors. And that shoestring budget led to this shockingly low number, $8,000. That was Seann William Scott's initial salary. When he landed the breakout role of Steve Stifler, he was literally working at a Home Depot and a zoo just to get by. Honestly, that paycheck wouldn't even cover a fraction of the cars he'd be driving in the sequels. But filming the thing was really only half the battle. Getting it into theaters was an absolute war with the ratings board. The MPAA initially slapped the film with the dreaded NC-17 rating, which would have instantly killed its box office chances. The directors literally had to submit the film 4 separate times. It was a war of trimming frames and toning down dialogue just to survive. The biggest hurdle wasn't even the famous pie scene. It was the Jim and Nadia bedroom scene, which had to be cut down to the absolute bare minimum just to secure that R rating. And this brilliantly illustrates how that grueling ratings war paid off immensely. The film opened in July 1999, relied heavily on teenage word of mouth, and went on to gross a staggering $235 million worldwide. That's more than 20 times its production budget. It didn't just make money, it single-handedly revived the totally dead R-rated teen comedy genre. Section 2. Sequels and pop icons. Universal quickly realized they were sitting on an absolute gold mine. I mean, very few movies can claim to have added a permanent word to the global dictionary, but this one did exactly that. Uttered by John Cho's character in a single, taboo scene about Jennifer Coolidge's incredibly seductive performance as Stifler's mom, this slang term became a ubiquitous cultural archetype. It is wild to think about, but this term is still heavily referenced everywhere today in 2026. Following that first cultural bombshell, Universal just went all in with a rapid-fire theatrical release blitz. Just 2 years later, in 2001, American Pie 2 arrived with a much higher budget and completely shattered records with a $45 million opening, proving the first film was absolutely no fluke. Then, by the 2003 release of American Wedding, the franchise skipped the college years entirely to focus on adulthood. This marked a major transition away from the full ensemble cast, writing certain actors out to tighten up the story. The absolute most fascinating part of that theatrical trilogy is the evolution of Steve Stifler. Think about it. In 1999, he was a pure antagonist. He was just this boorish agent of chaos meant to torment the main group. But by 2003, he had somehow become this lovable, albeit still disgusting, anti-hero who actually steps up and organizes the wedding. Why? Because Seann William Scott's infectious improvisational energy was so undeniably magnetic that he basically forced the writers to completely transform his character arc. Section 3. The direct-to-video empire. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how things changed after the theatrical run ended. A highly cynical yet massively profitable corporate strategy was just getting started. By 2005, the DVD market was at its absolute peak. Universal's brilliant business strategy was to bypass theaters completely to generate tens of millions in home video sales. The formula was ruthless but effective. Slap the Stifler name on it, add unknown relatives, hire cheaper actors, crank up the unrated nudity, and crucially, keep Eugene Levy as the anchor. The progression of these low-budget spin-offs was pretty steep. You've got Bandcamp, Naked Mile, Beta House, and Book of Love, basically devolving rapidly from a rehash of the original into sheer spectacle and frat party simulators.
But the anchor holding it all together, Eugene Levy. He became the hardest-working man in the universe. While the rest of the cast moved on, Universal paid Levy handsomely to give the franchise a stamp of legitimacy. His deadpan professionalism provided a comforting anchor for fans renting these DVDs back in the blockbuster days.
Section 4. The Nostalgic Reunion. So, by 2012, streaming is on the rise and the direct-to-video market is shrinking fast. Universal pulls off an absolute logistical miracle and gets the entire 30-something cast back together. And remember that $8,000 paycheck from the first movie? Check out this massive contrast. $5 million. That was Seann William Scott's reported paycheck for American Reunion. It perfectly shows just how much the leverage had flipped. They needed Stifler back, and they had to pay up. And you know what? That massive investment paid off. American Reunion grossed $235 million worldwide, matching the original 1999 film almost exactly. It worked because it didn't pretend they were still teenagers. Acknowledging the realities of aging, marriage ruts, and dead-end jobs really resonated deeply with audiences. It proved for sure that nostalgia is a highly potent drug. Section 5. A billion-dollar legacy. So, the crucial point is how this franchise left an ultimate cultural footprint, and it was absolutely a double-edged sword for the cast. The breakout teen roles unfortunately trapped the younger actors like Seann William Scott in severe typecasting, though he eventually found a great groove in TV shows like Welcome to Flatch. Conversely, the older actors used it as a major springboard. Eugene Levy shed his Jim's dad persona to win Emmys for Schitt's Creek, and Jennifer Coolidge hit late-career prestige TV gold in The White Lotus.
But underneath all the gross-out fluids and what is essentially a pre-social media time capsule of 90s humor, we really have to remember why it endured. At its core, it wasn't about sex. It was a story about male friendship, the terrifying vulnerability of growing up, and the deep fear of being left behind. The genuine affection between these characters is exactly why we are still talking about it 25 years later.
When you tally up all the theatrical grosses and those massive home video sales, you hit this absolutely staggering figure, over $1 billion in revenue. It turned a tiny $11 million gamble into a global empire, proving once and for all that adult comedies could be massive, worldwide blockbusters. Which leaves us with this final thought. A fresh legacy sequel script is currently in development by Sujata Day. But the comedy world of 2026 looks vastly different from 1999. Can modern audiences really embrace a modernized, deconstructed take on 90s raunch? Are we ready for a return to East Great Falls? Let that sink in as you consider the incredible, unpredictable history we just explored. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and keep learning.